It started 4 days ago. At first, I didn't think much of it. Fog isn't exactly rare this time of year, not in a town like mine, tucked into the woods, hugged by endless pine, with narrow roads that feel more like veins than streets. It's always a little eerie out here in the fall, especially in the mornings. But this fog, this was something else entirely. It never lifted. The first morning, I opened my front door with a coffee in hand, expecting it to clear up by noon, like it usually does, but it stayed thick and unmoving, like a wall pressed against my property line. You couldn't see the street. You couldn't even see the mailbox. I stood there a moment, listening. That was the first thing I noticed. The silence. No birds. No rustling leaves. Not even the wind. Just dot, 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 dot stillness. By the second day, it started to feel wrong. The fog had become so dense that I couldn't see beyond the edge of my own yard. It wrapped around everything like a shroud, flattening all sound, all movement. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on the house. I called the power company, wondering if a nearby generator had malfunctioned and spewed chemicals into the atmosphere. They told me there were no incidents, just seasonal patterns, but I knew better. Fog isn't supposed to feel alive. That night after dinner, I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing dishes, trying to ignore the sense of unease twisting in my stomach. That's when I saw it. Just beyond the reach of the porch light, at the border where the yard met the fog. A shape. A figure. I froze mid-rinse. The plate slipped from my hands and cracked against the basin. I stared, heart thudding in my chest, barely breathing. The silhouette stood motionless, tall and narrow, its edges blurred by the mist. It didn't move. It didn't shift or waver. It just stood there, watching, or dot dot dot, maybe not watching. I couldn't tell. There were no eyes, no features, just a shadow carved into the fog. Then, without warning, it faded, not stepped back. Not turned around, just dissolved into the mist, like smoke snuffed out by wind. Only there was no wind, not even a breeze. I shut the blinds in a panic and stumbled away from the window. My hands were still wet, water dripping onto the floor, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, listening for something. A knock, a footstep, anything. But the silence was absolute. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe I was just overtired, overcaffeinated. But even then, something in the air felt wrong. Too still. Too cold. I turned off the light and tried to settle my nerves. Maybe if I couldn't see out, it wouldn't feel so ominous. But the darkness inside only made things worse. The walls of my home, usually warm and familiar, suddenly felt like the thin shell of a ship adrift in a frozen ocean. I couldn't help myself. I went back to the window. I moved slowly, heart pounding as I parted the blinds just an inch, just enough to see if it was still there. It was closer now. Not at the edge of the yard anymore, but halfway up the lawn. The figure had gained definition. It was impossibly tall, its head slightly cocked to the left, like it was listening. But still no features, just a void of shadow carved into the world. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look away. Then, like before, it vanished, gone in the blink of an eye, the fog swallowing it whole without so much as a trace. I locked every door in the house. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed with the blankets pulled to my chin, eyes fixed on the faint glow leaking in around the blinds. I told myself I wouldn't check again. But around 3 a.m., when I couldn't take it anymore, I crept to the living room and peeked out. Nothing. Just gray fog, still and endless. But as I turned to go back to bed, I heard it. A tap. Then another, light, deliberate, rhythmic. It was coming from the kitchen window. My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen in the hallway, afraid to move. The tapping continued, soft, steady, like fingers on glass. Not impatient. Not aggressive. Just patient. I thought of calling someone. But what would I even say? Hi, there's something in the fog tapping on my window. I backed away slowly, not daring to look again. I slept with the lights on, curled up on the couch, crowbar in my lap. The sound of the taps were playing in my head long after they'd stopped. The fog didn't move, not an inch. I woke up on the couch with the blanket twisted around my legs, the crowbar still clutched tight in my hands. The TV was still on, some late night infomercial flickering in the dim light, and outside, the fog had thickened. Somehow, impossibly, it looked heavier than the night before, like concrete poured from the sky, clinging to every corner of the world. I tried to shake off the dread, tell myself that the tapping had been a dream, that the figure was a trick of the light, that I was just tired, stressed, maybe coming down with something. But I could feel it in the bones of the house, in the stale chill of the air. Something was outside, and it hadn't left. The kitchen felt like a freezer. I shuffled toward the counter, trying to make coffee with shaking hands. The sound of the machine gurgling and hissing was a small comfort, something normal, something alive. But as I reached for my mug and glanced out the window, I dropped it. The ceramic shattered across the floor. The silhouette was back. It stood at the edge of the yard again, exactly where it had been the first time, as if the previous night never happened, as if it had returned to a checkpoint, only now it wasn't alone. A second shape lingered in the mist behind it, smaller, slightly hunched. I stared, throat dry, unable to blink. Neither of them moved. I backed away from the window step by step until I bumped into the counter. I gripped the edge to keep from collapsing. The fog didn't waver. The figures didn't flicker. They just waited. My phone buzzed. The sound nearly made me scream. A text from my neighbor, Mr. Harris. "You all right, Clara?" Heard something strange last night. I stared at the message, unsure what to say. Mr. Harris was a quiet man in his 60s. Lived a few houses down. We only spoke occasionally, mostly over fences or when he dropped off vegetables from his garden. He always seemed a little odd, but... And now he was texting me at 6:47 a.m. about something strange. I typed and deleted 3 different replies before settling on, "Yeah, just weird fog. Did you see anything?" He didn't reply. I couldn't sit in that house any longer doing nothing. I needed answers, or at the very least, evidence that I wasn't losing my mind. So I went into my storage closet and pulled out my old DSLR camera. Photography used to be a hobby of mine before things got complicated. I brought the camera to the kitchen, carefully aiming it through the blinds. The lens strained to focus through the mist. Static, blur, refraction. The autofocus went haywire. I tried manual mode. The moment I snapped a photo, the screen glitched. Lines of distortion cut through the display. The image was unreadable. Frustrated, I stepped away to rub my eyes. When I looked back, the figures were gone. I hadn't heard them move. They hadn't made a sound. That's when it hit me. This fog wasn't just concealing things, it was erasing them, hiding their passage, their intentions, their purpose, and maybe their identity. I didn't go to work. I didn't leave the house. I spent the rest of the day pacing, jumping at every creak of the wood, every gust against the siding. I checked every lock, closed every curtain, unplugged the blinking security light outside that kept casting strange shapes onto my ceiling. At 8:23 p.m., the fog shifted, not cleared, not lifted, shifted like a curtain swaying slightly in a breeze. Only there was no breeze. I looked out the window. They were closer. There were 3 of them now, one at the edge of the porch, one on the walkway, one near the old tree in my yard, arms unnaturally long and hanging low, like they had too many joints. Their forms were clear now, not just shadows, but people-shaped voids. The fog moved around them like they had mass. I couldn't take it. I yanked the blind shut and backed away. And that's when I heard the doorbell. Not a knock, not tapping. A calm, deliberate ring. I screamed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The doorbell rang again, long, steady, too normal for what was outside. Then it stopped. 30 seconds later, a soft SHHK slid under the door. like paper being slipped through. I crept forward. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. There, on the doormat, was a single yellowed envelope. My name scrawled on the front in tight, slanted handwriting. Clara. No address. No return info. I picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a note. Only 7 words. Come outside, Clara. We brought him back. There was no signature, just a small red fingerprint at the bottom. Too small to be mine. My hands were shaking so violently, I almost dropped the letter. We brought him back. Those words echoed in my mind, bouncing between panic and confusion. Who was he? What did they mean by back? A chill bled into my spine as I read the sentence again, over and over and over, trying to make sense of it. The paper felt oddly cold in my hand, damp, like it had been pulled from a basement rather than slipped under a door. I looked outside again. The fog had thickened to the point that the porch light was just a hazy, glowing orb. I couldn't make out the ground, the trees, the silhouettes, if they were still there, but I could feel them. I didn't need to see them to know they hadn't gone. I slammed the door shut, double-checked the locks, and backed away. Then my brain caught up to the note. We brought him back. They knew me. Not just my name. They knew something about me. Something personal. Something painful. There was only one person I could think of. Only one him that would matter enough to use against me. Liam, my brother. Gone for 2 years now. The memory rushed in like a flash flood. Liam and I grew up in this house. After our parents passed, he stayed here while I moved to the city. But when his mental health spiraled, voices, shadows, constant paranoia, he isolated himself. I tried to get him help, but it wasn't enough. One night, he walked out into the woods behind the house and never came back. They searched for weeks. No body, no footprints. Just his jacket, found snagged on a tree branch like something had lifted him into the air. Everyone told me he was gone. I never really believed them. And now this note. I pressed the letter against my chest and stumbled into the living room. I needed air. I needed clarity. I needed to know if someone was playing a cruel joke or if something unthinkable had followed me home from that awful day. I sat on the couch, clutching the crowbar with one hand and the letter in the other. The fog pushed against every window, opaque and pulsing. I could feel it, them pressing against the glass, watching me through a membrane of mist. The house felt wrong, smaller, compressed, like the walls had shifted inward. Then the TV turned on by itself. Static. Just gray, flickering static. I dropped the letter and lunged for the remote, mashing the power button. Nothing. The image didn't change, but the volume began to rise on its own. Low at first, then louder and louder until the static became a roar in my ears. And through the chaos, a voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. Clara. I staggered back, dropping the remote. The static shifted into a warped image just for a second. A face. Blurred and twisted, but unmistakable. Liam. His eyes were sunken. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Just static and that strange, elongated Clara from moments ago. Then the TV turned off. Darkness. Silence. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the room. The shadows writhing in the corners like they were alive. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. One at a time. Like bare feet on old wood. But I lived alone. My stomach flipped as I realized I'd never checked the attic door after I moved in. It was bolted shut when I returned to live here, and I left it that way, rusted over, sealed with old nails and dust. Until now. I grabbed the flashlight and headed for the stairs, heart pounding in my chest. The light flickered as I climbed, every creak of the steps sounding like thunder in the dead quiet of the house. The hallway upstairs was darker than it should have been. My flashlight's beam barely pierced the air, like the mist had crept inside and thickened it. I turned toward the attic door and froze. The bolt had been removed. The nails were gone. The door was ajar. A narrow slit of blackness waited beyond it. breathing cold air into the hallway like an exhale from some deep, unseen place. And then a voice from inside the attic. Clara. It was him. It was his voice. Tired. Broken. Exactly as I remembered it the night before he disappeared. But it wasn't right. It was too calm. Too perfect. Like someone playing a recording. A memory stitched together and sent back to lure me in. My eyes burned. My legs wanted to move forward, but my brain screamed not to. Every instinct told me this was a trap. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Clara, I'm cold. Can you open the door? I backed away. No, I whispered. Silence. A thud against the attic door. Soft, like someone resting their forehead on it. Please, the voice said. They won't let me leave unless you open it. My hand tightened around the crowbar, sweat dripping from my forehead. I took another step back. The air was colder now. The fog in the hallway was moving, curling down from the attic like fingers reaching for me. Then, without warning, the attic door slammed shut on its own. I screamed. The floor beneath me groaned. The walls trembled. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping, and rushed to the front door. I needed to leave. I didn't care about the fog. I didn't care what waited outside. I'd rather die in the forest than spend another second in this house. But as I reached for the doorknob, another knock, this time from the inside of the door. I froze mid-motion, hand just inches from the doorknob. Another knock. But this time it wasn't coming from outside. It was from within the house. From the door, the inside panel, as if someone was standing right in front of me, between me and the fog, knocking from the wrong side. The knock came again. 3 slow, heavy taps. Knock, knock, knock. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the crowbar. My skin crawled with the sensation of something just behind me, breathing down my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Just the quiet house, dimly lit, windows shrouded by blinds, fog clawing against the glass. I had to get out. I turned back toward the door and ripped it open, expecting, maybe hoping, that it would be the silhouettes, or the fog reaching in, or even Liam, but there was nothing. The porch was empty, except for another letter. This one had no envelope. Just a folded piece of paper, sitting upright in the exact center of the welcome mat, like someone had carefully placed it there and stood back to admire their work. I picked it up with shaking fingers. You are almost ready. He's waiting below. The house is the door. Let us in. The last line was underlined. Let us in, written in a thicker, darker ink that bled into the paper like blood into tissue. Something scuttled across the porch behind me. I turned, crowbar raised. Nothing again. But the fog was crawling up the steps now, inch by inch, like it had fingers and joints. It didn't flow like air. It climbed like a living thing. I slammed the door shut and locked it again, chest heaving, heart hammering in my ears. That's when my phone lit up on the hallway table. Another text from Mr. Harris. Don't go to the basement. That's how they got him. I stared at the message, my pulse pounding in my temples. How do you know this? I typed. What are they? No response. I waited, until the screen dimmed. No reply ever came. But I already knew he was right. I'd felt it since the first night. The basement had been wrong from the start. I hadn't gone down there since I moved back into the house. Hadn't touched the door, hadn't so much as turned on the light. But the more I tried to avoid it, the louder the whispers became. And now they were chanting, low and rhythmic, like some ancient language humming through the air. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel them crawling down my spine into the marrow of my bones. I stood in the hallway staring at the basement door. I hadn't realized I'd walked all the way to it. My hand was already on the doorknob. Something was calling me. From below, I turned the knob. It opened on the first try. The basement light switch was dead, of course. I clicked it 3 times, but nothing. Only more darkness and the scent of mildew and something else. Something old and wrong, like wet stone and burnt hair. I should have run. I should have left the house when I had the chance. But I didn't. I stepped down the first stair, then another, and another. Each one creaked beneath my weight, the air growing colder with every step. I was halfway down when I heard it, a soft shuffle, something dragging across concrete. I froze, my flashlight flickered. For 1 second, I saw the basement clearly, and I saw him, Liam, sitting on the floor in the center of the basement, back turned toward me, shoulders hunched, arms resting limply at his sides. His clothes were the same as the night he vanished. The same torn hoodie, the same jeans, covered in mud, mildew, and something darker on the cuffs. Liam? I whispered. He didn't move. My heart thudded so hard it hurt. I stepped closer, my foot slipping slightly on the wet step. The flashlight flickered again, then went out. Total darkness. I stopped breathing. From the far corner of the basement, something clicked. Then came the whisper right beside my ear. It's not him anymore. I screamed and stumbled back, slamming into the wall. My hand smacked the flashlight. It flickered on for a split second. The figure in the middle of the room was standing now, not facing me, not facing away. Just turned slightly, head cocked, just like the silhouette. In the fog, but now I could see the details. It looked like Liam, but stretched, too tall, bones too thin, arms too long. Like someone had pulled him apart and tried to put him back together. His skin was pale gray, almost translucent in places. Veins? Visible. Black ichor dripped from his fingertips. And when he opened his mouth, his voice wasn't his anymore. Clara, he said. But it echoed, layered. Too many voices stacked on top of each other. I turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut so hard I heard the wood crack. I locked it. Then barricaded it with the hall table, 2 chairs, anything I could drag over. The whispering outside the house stopped. Because now the whispering was inside, and it was coming from every room. The walls pulsed, the house groaned, and my phone buzzed one last time. There's only one way to survive this, the message said. You have to finish what Liam started. I stared at the message on my phone, unable to look away. You have to finish what Liam started. What did that mean? What had Liam started? The house shuddered around me, like it was breathing. The whispering that once came from the fog now oozed from the walls themselves, no longer outside trying to get in. It was in now, inside the drywall, inside the vents, inside me. I stumbled into the living room, clutching the crowbar like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. The lights flickered. The TV turned on again, static at first, and then once more Liam's face. Only this time it wasn't distorted. It was clear. He looked tired, sick, like he'd been living underground for years. But his eyes, they were still his, desperate, pleading. Clara, he said through the screen. They're using me. I let them in. The image glitched, then stabilized. You have to close it. The house, it's the threshold. They marked me and I opened it. I shook my head. What threshold? What did you do? His face wavered. I thought they were voices in my head. But it was the fog. It finds people who are alone, people who are grieving. It fed on me. I let it anchor. Another flicker? You have to burn it down, Clara. The foundation. It's rooted in the basement. That's where they're coming through. That's where I let them in. And then, as if on cue, the image went black. The screen cracked from the inside. I stood. In silence, every word echoing in my skull. Burn it down. The foundation. The fog hadn't just crept in over the last few days. It had been waiting, feeding, spreading through every board, every pipe, every wall, until the house wasn't just a house anymore. It was a door, and Liam had opened it. But he hadn't closed it. I rushed to the storage room, flinging open cabinets until I found the old red gas can I used to keep for the lawnmower. Still half full. I grabbed it and dragged it back toward the hallway. As I passed the window, I stopped. The silhouettes were gone. The yard was empty. No fog, no movement. Just black. The world beyond the windows wasn't foggy anymore. It was just gone. Like the fog had thickened so much it had devoured the town, the trees, even the sky. Nothing but a flat, infinite void stretched out in every direction. And my house sat like a single tooth in a giant, open mouth. The power cut out, the lights died. Silence. Not a peaceful kind. The oppressive, suffocating kind. My own breathing sounded too loud in the absence of everything else. I poured the gasoline along the hallway, into the living room, along the baseboards. Every step felt like I was being watched. Every creak was a whisper I couldn't quite understand. I reached the basement door. The barricade I'd built earlier was still in place, but the door behind it was wide open. Not broken, just open. From the shadows below, something crawled. Out. A hand. Not Liam's. Longer. Rare. Skin like ash and bone. Then another. Then a head. Misshapen. Eyeless, gaping where a mouth should be. The thing began to pull itself up the stairs, inch by inch. I grabbed the lighter from the kitchen drawer, flicked it on with shaking hands, and then a voice behind me. Don't. I turned. Liam, standing at the foot of the hallway, soaked in shadow, eyes wide. His form shimmered like a mirage, his mouth trembling. If you burn it, he said, I'll be gone too. He stepped forward. You don't have to do this. We can stop them another way. Let me in, just open the door. But I saw it now. His eyes weren't pleading anymore. They were hungry. His voice echoed again, layered, warped. Let me in, Clara. Behind him, the walls of the house began to bleed. Black sludge. Ooze from the vents, down the corners. The door frames cracked, the windows rattled with unseen wind. The thing on the stairs pulled itself up another step. Now, a full torso exposed. Too many ribs, no face. Just a hollow with whispers pouring out of it. I looked at Liam, at the thing on the stairs, at the house, and I knew. Liam was already gone. Whatever was speaking through him wasn't my brother. I struck the lighter, dropped it into the gasoline-soaked floor. The fire caught immediately, roaring up the walls like the house had been waiting for it. Liam screamed, a sound that turned into a dozen voices, each twisted and wrong, echoing through the smoke. The figure on the stairs shrieked and slithered back, flailing as fire licked its skin. The fog outside the windows trembled, and then cracked. I saw it. For just a moment, not fog, but a membrane, a cocoon wrapped around my house. And as the fire consumed the threshold, it shattered like glass under pressure. The scream stopped. The house shook violently as flames spread. The air filled with heat, smoke, and something else, something leaving. I crawled toward the back door, coughing, blinded, gripping the crowbar like it would protect me. Just before I reached the exit, I heard it again, one final whisper, fading. You were supposed to let us in. I burst through the back door just as the fire reached the upper floor, the heat chasing me across the yard like a living thing. Smoke curled around the night air, blending with what was left of the fog, now thin, receding like it had lost its anchor. Behind me, the house howled. Not creaked. Howled. A sound that wasn't wood splitting or windows bursting. It was grief, rage, a voice without a body screaming, into its own unraveling. I stumbled into the grass, coughing violently, trying to suck clean air into lungs that had inhaled too much smoke and fear. My knees gave out halfway to the fence, and I collapsed, watching the flames consume everything. The silhouettes didn't return. The fog didn't reach for me. It stayed near the porch, like a wounded animal unsure if it was dying or just forgotten. And then, as the fire roared higher, licking the attic windows, swallowing the roof, it began to pull back. The fog retreated across the yard in slow serpentine waves, vanishing into the black void beyond the trees like it had never existed at all. It wasn't wind that scattered it. It wasn't heat. It was loss. I looked down and realized I was still clutching the crowbar. My fingers were so tightly wrapped around it. My knuckles had turned white, the metal biting into my palm like a reminder. This was real. All of it. Behind me, the roof collapsed inward. Embers rose into the night sky, like fireflies escaping hell. I didn't move until I saw headlights, Mr. Harris's pickup. It rolled up slowly, crunching gravel as it pulled into my driveway. He stepped out, his silhouette framed in the headlights. Tall, older, wearing that same faded army jacket he always had on during autumn. He walked up beside me in silence, hands in his coat pockets, eyes locked on the burning house. "I warned you," he said quietly. "Didn't I?" I nodded, unable to speak. He didn't look at me when he spoke again. "Liam opened it, you closed it. That's the way these things work." My voice was hoarse. "What were they?" Mr. Harris was quiet for a long moment. "Then they're not ghosts. Not demons. They don't have names like we do, but they remember us. They remember pain, fear, grief. They feed on people who leave a door cracked open in their soul." I swallowed hard, the memory of Liam's face flickering through my mind, or his face. "I almost let them in," I whispered. "But you didn't," Mr. Harris said. "And that makes all the difference." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the fire dying down as the house finally collapsed in on itself. No more screams. No more movement. Just the slow, smoldering hiss of something ending. Eventually, he turned back toward his truck. "Don't rebuild," he said. "Whatever you do, don't rebuild here. The ground's not clean anymore." And then he drove off into the darkness. 3 weeks later, they called it a structural fire. Electrical fault, they said. No suspicion. Arson, no questions asked. Insurance covered part of it. No one asked about the fog or the figures or the attic door that slammed itself shut. I didn't give them the real story. How could I? I moved into a small apartment in the city. High floor, no basement, lots of neighbors. Every night I sleep with the lights on, and every morning I check the windows, not for fog, but for shadows. So far there are none, but I know they're still out there, waiting for another door to open. Sometimes, just before sleep, I hear a faint whisper through the vents. So soft I can almost convince myself it's the wind. But every now and then, I swear I hear my name. Clara. And I keep the crowbar under my bed, just in case. It started on a Sunday night. The kind of night where the quiet feels just a little too perfect. The wind outside had settled. The leaves on the trees weren't rustling anymore. Even the old pipes in my house weren't making their usual midnight. Groans, the world was still, unnaturally so. I was lying in bed, reading the last chapter of a crime novel I'd lost interest in a week ago, when I heard it. A cry, soft, high-pitched, muffled, but definitely a cry. I paused, finger hovering over the page. At first, I thought maybe it was a cat outside, or a neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall, but it didn't sound like either. It sounded human, a baby. I sat up slowly, the book sliding off my lap onto the floor. My heart was already starting to beat faster. I live alone, on a quiet street, just past the edge of town. The nearest neighbor is about half a block away, and there are no children on this stretch. So the idea of hearing a baby at this hour, or at all, didn't sit right with me. I stood, walked softly toward my bedroom door, and cracked it open. The sound was clearer now. A low, sorrowful wail. Not constant, but broken up by gasping, shuddering breaths, like a baby that's been crying for hours. It rose and fell in a pattern that hit something primal in me. It was the kind of cry that didn't just sound sad, it sounded abandoned. I followed it. Down the hall, past the guest bathroom, into the living room, where everything was quiet except for that sound. Still. Distant, but distinct. I turned in a slow circle, trying to pinpoint it. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from outside at all. It was coming from the chimney. I stared at it in disbelief. The fireplace was bricked up, sealed tight decades ago. The brickwork didn't match the rest of the house. It was newer, like it had been added later, almost hastily. Whoever did. It hadn't even bothered to paint over it. Just rows of dull red bricks, jagged and dusty, like the house had tried to forget what it used to be. I took a step forward, cautious. The crying continued, and now I could hear something else, something. Behind it, not quite words, not quite a breath. A whisper? Maybe. Or just the way the sound bounced off the stone. I leaned closer. And then, as I got within a few feet of the hearth, the crying stopped. Just like that. Silence. I stood frozen, waiting for it to return. My ears strained. My breath caught. Nothing. I knelt down, cautiously pressing my ear to the cool bricks. And that's when I heard it again, not the crying this time, but something worse. A sharp, desperate shush. The kind of sound you'd make to quiet someone quickly. The kind that wasn't comforting, but panicked. Urgent. It was followed by what sounded like fingernails scratching faintly on stone. I jumped back, my hand, flying to my mouth to keep from screaming. My heart thundered in my chest. I stared at the bricks, the same way you might stare at the surface of a frozen lake after hearing something crack beneath it. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't a raccoon. Something was in there. I backed away fast, not taking my eyes off the chimney until I was out of the room. I closed my bedroom door and locked it, like that could stop anything, and curled. Up in the corner with my phone in my hand. I almost called someone. The police. A friend. Anyone. But what would I even say? Yes, there's a baby crying in my fireplace, which, by the way, is completely bricked over. They'd think I was nuts. I was starting to think I was nuts. Eventually, I managed to fall asleep around dawn, the fear dulling into exhaustion. The next day, I told myself it had to be a dream, a vivid one. Sure, but just a dream. I didn't go back into the living room. I didn't even go near the chimney. I made coffee, read the news, kept the TV on all day, anything to drown out the silence. But the following night, it happened again. Same cry, same time, a little louder. And when I pressed my ear to the wall, there were two voices now. One, crying, and the other whispering. I didn't sleep at all that second night, not even a minute. I sat in bed, wrapped in blankets, phone clutched tight in one hand, staring at the hallway like something might walk through it at any moment. My ears rang with the echoes of the cry I'd heard again, that awful, strangled wail that didn't belong anywhere near a sealed chimney. But that wasn't the worst part. The second voice had returned too. I don't know how to explain it. Without sounding insane, but it sounded like me. Not exactly. Not like a recording. More like someone doing a horrible impression of me. Mimicking my tone, my pitch, like it had been listening, studying. When I leaned in close to the bricks last night, I heard it whisper something I'll never forget. She. Emily. You'll wake her. My knees nearly gave out. I backed away and locked myself in the bedroom until the morning sun filtered through the curtains. I felt safe again only when the light hit the floorboards. But even then, I kept checking the hallway like I was expecting to see a shadow where there shouldn't be one. By noon, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I made myself go into the living room. I forced myself to walk straight up to the fireplace. My feet dragged, legs stiff, but I got there. The bricks looked the same, old, uneven, dusty. But now there was something different about the air around them. It felt colder, not just cool from the weather, but like a draft from something ancient and forgotten. I crouched again, hesitating. Then I pressed my ear to the brick. Silence, not even a breath. I stood back up, arms crossed, trying to steady myself. It had to be some kind of old ventilation noise. An animal in the wall. My own exhausted brain inventing sounds. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I needed proof. That afternoon, I dug out my old digital recorder from college, a cheap handheld thing I hadn't used in years. I set it on the mantle and hit record, then I left the room. I sat in the kitchen, trying not to watch the clock, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I jumped at every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows. I didn't go back into the living room until well after midnight. The fireplace stood there in the dark, silent, and still. I grabbed the recorder with trembling hands and brought it back into the kitchen. I hit play. The first minute or two were just static and ambient room noise, the soft hum of the fridge from the other side of the house, the faint buzz of electricity. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for, the baby's cry, muffled, distant, but so clear, and underneath it, whispering. My whispering. On the recording, I heard myself, or something pretending to be me, say, "Don't cry, Mama's here." I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor with a sharp crack, the batteries popping out and rolling across the linoleum. I couldn't breathe. It had called me Mama. I stared at the recorder for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind was caught in a whirl of possibilities. Could someone be playing a prank? Hacking into my home somehow? But how? The chimney was sealed. The fireplace had no opening, no access point, no crawl space behind it. I had checked twice. It was solid masonry. The crying wasn't coming from somewhere. It was coming through. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. Instead, I sat on the couch across from the fireplace, lamp on, crowbar on my lap. I don't know what I thought I'd do with it. Break it open? Fight off whatever came crawling out. Around 2:30 a.m., the air turned cold again. I watched in stunned disbelief as the lamp beside me flickered. Once, twice, then it went out completely. A low groan came from the bricks, like stone shifting under pressure. I held my breath, and then it happened again, the cry. But this time, it was right behind the bricks. No longer muffled, no longer distant. It sounded like something was inches from the surface. Like if I reached out and touched the wall, I'd feel it breathing through the stone. I stood up slowly, backing away, crowbar still clutched in my fist. And that's when I heard my own voice, not through the recorder, not in my head. In real time, spoken aloud. From behind the bricks. Don't be afraid, Emily. We're just cold. The crying stopped. The house fell silent. And then a knock came from inside the fireplace. 3 slow knocks, as if something was asking to be let out. The knocking stopped after the third thud, but the silence it left behind was worse. I stood there in the dark, every nerve in, my body screaming at me to run, to get as far away from that fireplace as possible. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, the crowbar still clenched so tightly in my hands, my fingers were beginning to cramp. I forced myself to turn away, to walk toward the hallway. Each step felt like I was moving underwater. The moment I crossed the threshold into the hallway, the light flickered back on behind me, like whatever was behind that bricked-up chimney wanted me to know it could control things now. Back in my bedroom, I closed the door and shoved. Chair under the knob, though it felt absurd. I wasn't worried about burglars or creeps. I was worried about a voice that sounded like mine whispering lullabies to something that shouldn't exist. Sleep didn't come. Not even a minute. I lay in bed, watching the sliver of light under the door, waiting for it to go out again. It didn't. But just as the sun began to rise, I heard it again. One faint, broken sob, trailing off into nothing. Like it wanted me to know it was still there. The next morning, I did what I should have done from the beginning. I went to the local library. I'd only moved into this house 6 months ago. It was a fixer-upper that had sat on the market for years, and I'd gotten it at a steal, which should have been a red flag. But I was broke, desperate, and the place had a strange charm to it. Now I was starting to understand why no one else had taken it. I sat down at one of the public computers and started searching records, anything I could find about my address. The previous owners or permits filed for the home. It didn't take long. The house had a name once. The Hartwell residence. I scrolled through brittle newspaper archives until I found a headline from 1968. Woman found dead in fireplace, infant daughter missing. I clicked it open with trembling fingers. The article was short, cold, A woman named Cynthia Hartwell had been reported missing after neighbors heard strange crying coming from the house. When police forced entry, they discovered her body, half inside the old fireplace. Her torso twisted unnaturally, like she'd been trying to crawl into it. But the oddest detail? The fireplace had already been partially bricked shut from the inside. And her infant daughter? Never found. No signs of escape. No trace of abduction. Just gone. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. Something twisted in me as I remembered what I'd heard the night before. That awful whisper, "Don't be afraid, Emily. We're just cold." I closed the browser and left the library without checking out a single book. That night, I went into the attic. I don't know what made me think to do it. Maybe I needed to know if there was more to this house than what I could see. Maybe I just wanted to feel in control of something. The attic door creaked open like a horror movie cliche. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight as I climbed the wooden steps. The air was heavy up there, dry, chokingly stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Most of what I found was junk. Boxes of rotted holiday decorations, old suitcases. But shoved in the farthest corner, hidden beneath a moth-eaten tarp, I found a small wooden chest. It was locked, but the hinges were rusted. I pried it open with the crowbar. Inside were baby clothes, tiny, yellowed, and brittle with age, folded neatly next to a ceramic rattle and a bundle of newspaper clippings tied with a string. I picked up the bundle with shaking hands. The articles were all about the same thing, Cynthia Hartwell, her death, her missing child, rumors of infant wails heard in the neighborhood for years after the incident. Police had investigated several times, but found nothing. Taped to the back of the last clipping was a photo, black and white, grainy, of Cynthia holding her baby. The baby's face was blurry, overexposed in the picture, but something about it made my skin crawl. The infant was looking directly into the camera, and she looked like me. I dropped the bundle and stumbled backward. That was impossible, wasn't it? By the time I got back downstairs, night had fallen. The house was quiet, too quiet. I didn't turn on the lights. I just walked slowly into the living room and sat on the floor across from the fireplace. The bricks looked darker now, wetter, like something behind them was breathing against the wall. I whispered, voice shaking, "What do you want from me?" For a long time, there was no answer. Then, from deep within the chimney, I heard the baby cry again, but different this time, calmer, almost content, followed by my own voice, whispered low, "Come hold her, Mama. She's been waiting so long." I didn't respond to the voice. Not out loud, at least. Inside, though, something cracked. A quiet fracture deep in the part of my mind that had been trying to hold on to normalcy. The voice had called me Mama again, and not like a ghostly echo or distortion. It was warm, familiar, like it believed what it was saying. I sat there, shivering in the dark, staring at the bricks. The crying had faded, but the feeling of being watched hadn't. I couldn't explain it, but it wasn't just the fireplace anymore. The entire house felt dot, alert, like the walls were listening. That night, I moved the couch and coffee table out of the way and cleared the floor in front of the hearth. Then I went into the garage and brought in a sledgehammer. If this was madness, then I needed to go all the way. I positioned the hammer and struck the center brick with everything I had. Dust flew. The impact echoed through the house like a gunshot. A small crack ran through the mortar. The crying resumed instantly, but not distant and muffled like before. Now it was close, pressed right against the other side of the bricks. I froze, my chest heaving. Then, from behind the wall, I heard it again, that whisper in my own voice. "She's been waiting for you, Emily. Don't make her wait anymore." With shaking arms, I raised the hammer and struck again, and again. Mortar crumbled. Bricks began to loosen. One fell inward with a dull thud. Cold air rushed out from the opening, smelling of damp earth and mildew. I gagged. When I finally cleared enough space to see inside, I staggered back. There was a cavity behind the bricks. A hidden void. Larger than it should have been, like the space between the walls had been hollowed out. The flashlight beam trembled as I shined it inside. I saw something. A small wooden cradle. It was rocking slowly, gently, as if someone had just nudged it. And inside it, wrapped in rotting cloth, curled like a sleeping infant, was a tiny bundle. I couldn't see a face. The cloth was so thick and stained that it looked more like a cocoon than a blanket. The cradle creaked again, rocking a little harder this time. Then came a faint, wet sound. A coo. And behind it, a voice. Not mine this time. A woman's voice. Soft. Sad. Margaret. There she is. That's your mother, sweetheart. I dropped the flashlight. Everything went dark. When I came to, I was lying on the floor. The bricks were undisturbed again. No hole. No opening. No sign of what I had seen. But I knew it had happened. My hands were coated in gray dust. My lungs ached from the debris. And worst of all, the cradle, that name, was still echoing in my mind. Margaret. I didn't know what else to do. So I called the historical society in town. Told them I was doing a personal research project on the Hartwell family and wanted to know more about their child. The woman on the phone hesitated before answering. You're the one living in the house now, aren't you? She asked. Lead said no. She sighed. I'm not supposed to talk about that case anymore, but her name was Margaret. She was 6 months old when she vanished. I asked if she had a photo. I doubt there were any. Back then, people didn't document babies as often, especially after what happened with the mother. I thanked her and hung up. But the name stuck in my head all day. Margaret. Why did? It feels so familiar. That night, as I lay in bed, I pulled out an old photo album my mom had given me when I moved. A bunch of baby pictures, family moments, old birthdays, most of them faded. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to ground myself, remind myself of who I really was. But somewhere near the back, tucked behind a photo of my 3rd birthday, I found something I didn't remember putting there. A black and white photo. Oh, creased. A woman in a long nightgown, holding a baby swaddled in a thick blanket. Written on the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, Cynthia and Margaret minus 1,968. I dropped the picture. My throat went dry. How did that photo end up in my album? How could I possibly be connected to this? I stared at it again. The baby's face was still blurred by age, but the woman? She looked like me, same eyes, same mouth. Or maybe I was just seeing what I feared most. Later that night, I awoke to the sound of humming, a lullaby. I recognized the tune. My mother used to hum it to me when I was little, but I hadn't heard it in years. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound was coming from the living room, from the chimney. I tiptoed down the hall and peeked around the corner. And there she was. A woman, translucent, bathed in a cold bluish light, kneeling beside the fireplace, cradling something in her arms, rocking, singing. She turned her head, slowly, and smiled at me. Come, Emily, she whispered. Your daughter's waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. The woman, or the thing that looked like one, was still kneeling by the fireplace. Her arms wrapped around something small, swaddled, unmoving. Her nightgown shimmered faintly, fabric shifting like it was underwater. The lines of her face were soft but wrong somehow. Her smile stretched too wide. Her eyes didn't blink. And still, she kept humming, rocking that bundle back and forth. Come, Emily, she repeated, her voice syrup sweet and ancient. You've come so far. Don't turn away now. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run back into my room and lock the door, but my legs wouldn't obey. My feet were like ice. My mouth hung open, but no sound came out. All I could do was stare at her, this impossible figure, this memory pulled from a photograph that had no business being in my home. And then she stood, effortless, still cradling the bundle. She stepped toward me, slowly, deliberately. her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. She knows you, the woman said, tilting her head. She's been waiting for your voice. Just say her name. That's all it takes. I backed away. I'm not her mother. I'm not your daughter. Her expression didn't change. But the thing in her arms began to squirm. A low whimper floated from the bundle, then louder. A hungry, broken sob. The baby was crying again. The woman smiled. Blood remembers. Even if you don't, even if it skips a generation, I nearly fell over the arm of the couch, trying to back away. You're not real, I muttered, more to myself than to her. You're not real, you're not real. She tilted her head again, gently. Then why does the house remember you? Suddenly, a deep groan came from the walls, like wood bending under massive pressure. The floor shook beneath my feet. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the fireplace behind her began to crack. Hairline fractures spread across the bricks I had sealed up just a day earlier. Mortar flaked off in clumps. Cold, moist air spilled out from the gaps like the house itself was exhaling. The woman turned toward the fireplace. It's almost time, she said. Help her, or she'll never stop crying. The lights blinked, and just like that, she vanished. The bundle hit the floor with a wet thud. I screamed, and the cry and that awful baby wail exploded through the room like it was being funneled through the walls. I don't remember picking it up. One moment, I was staring at it from across the room, and the next, it was in my arms. Heavy, damp, cold as ice. The rags wrapped around it were soaked through with something dark and sticky. It clung to my clothes and skin, but I couldn't let go. My hands wouldn't open. My body was holding it like it had always been mine. The crying stopped the instant I touched it. Silence returned. Total, suffocating silence. And then, for the first time, I heard her breathe. Shallow, soft exhales from inside the bundle. She was alive. At least in some twisted, impossible way. And for just a moment, I felt it. That pull. That ancient instinct. The part of the brain that doesn't think, doesn't reason. It just knows what a mother is supposed to do. Hold, rock, protect. I took one step backward. Then two. I made it to the hallway, still cradling her. Please, I whispered. Just tell me what you want. A whisper passed by my ear like wind through leaves. Bury her. I spent the rest of the night digging. Out behind the shed. Beneath the rotting tree where the grass never grew, I clawed at the earth with bare hands and a rusty spade. The ground was soft, almost like it had been disturbed before, and the bundle in my arms never moved again. The moment I placed her into the shallow grave, the air around me grew still. Warmer, even. I covered gently, packing the soil back with careful, deliberate motions. My hands shook. My face was streaked with tears and dirt. When I stood up, the wind shifted. And for the first time in nights, I heard nothing. No crying, no whispers. Only the wind through the trees and the distant sound of an owl. I walked back into the house, trembling. The fireplace was sealed. The photo album was gone. And the hallway lights, once flickering endlessly, now stayed solid. It was over, I thought. That morning, I made coffee with shaking hands. I sat at the table and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. Then I noticed the photo pinned to the fridge. One I didn't remember taking. It showed me in the yard, kneeling over a fresh patch of earth behind the shed. And standing behind me, arms crossed, smiling faintly, was the woman in the nightgown, Cynthia. Her eyes were proud. But it wasn't comfort I felt. It was something else. Because written in scrawled handwriting beneath the photo were 4 words. Thank you for remembering. The photo remained on the fridge for days. I tried to take it down more than once, tore it, even, but every morning it would be back, untouched, neat, pinned in place by the same cracked magnet that had held my grocery list a week ago. I stopped trying. The house had gone still. Since the night I buried the bundle, no more cries, no more whispers. The chill in the air had faded. At first, I thought it was peace, closure. I told myself I had helped something move on. Cynthia, or Margaret, or both. But something inside me kept turning over the truth. I hadn't saved anyone. I had just made it quiet. Too quiet. By the third night, I started dreaming of the tree in the backyard. In my dreams, it wasn't rotting anymore. It stood tall, bark blackened and smooth like stone, its limbs stretching toward a red sky. And underneath, where I had buried the bundle, something pulsed, breathing, growing. One morning, I went out there and found the ground disturbed. The dirt I had carefully packed was pushed upward, like something underneath had shifted. A small footprint sat in the center of the mound. Only one. Tiny. There. Deep, like a child had stepped up from the grave. I tried to leave. Packed a bag. Grabbed my keys. Drove 5 blocks toward the highway before my car stalled out at a green light. Completely dead. Not even a flicker from the dashboard. When the tow truck arrived, the driver took one look at the address on my registration and handed me back the keys. Not going there, he muttered. Nobody's dumb enough to touch that place. Not anymore. How do you even know my... But he was already walking back to his truck. I walked home. The house waited with its door ajar. Lights already. I decided to call my mother. We hadn't spoken in months since the move. But I needed answers. I needed something to prove I wasn't unraveling. Did we ever have a relative named Cynthia? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a long silence on the line. Then a sigh. Where did you hear that name? I told her about the photo in the album. The one labeled Cynthia and Margaret minus 1,968. Told her about the crying. The bricked up chimney. Jesus, she whispered. I never wanted you to know about that house. What house? She hesitated again. Your grandmother. My mother gave it to me. But I never lived there. Never stepped foot inside. She said the place was cursed. That a woman named Cynthia Hartwell buried her daughter alive. In that chimney after the baby wouldn't stop crying. Said it made her feel unclean. My blood turned cold. She was your great-aunt, Mom added quietly. On your father's side? It was in the papers, but nobody ever proved it. By the time they opened up the chimney, it was too late. They found bones, infant bones, wrapped in rags. She paused. You're saying you heard crying? I didn't answer. Her voice turned distant. Get out of that house. Emily, don't. Try to fix what doesn't want to be fixed. The call cut out. The line went dead. That night, the crying came back. But this time, it wasn't from the chimney. It came from inside the house, closer, room to room. Faint at first, then louder, following me down the hallway like a stalking animal. I locked myself in the bedroom and turned on every light. But when I looked in the mirror, there was mud on my hands, dirt under my nails, like I had been digging again. I scrubbed it until my skin went raw, but when I looked again, the mud had returned. Thicker this time. Coating my fingertips. Caked in my hair. The lights flickered, and from the hallway I heard the soft pad of footsteps. Tiny ones. Approaching the door, I held my breath. A soft tap, tap, tap on the wood, then a whisper. Let me in, Mama. I snapped. I threw open the door. There was no one there. Just a cold breeze drifting through the hall, rustling the photograph still pinned to the fridge. I marched toward it, ripping it free again. This time, I burned it. Held it over the stove burner until the edges curled and blackened and turned to ash. I watched it die. But even before the flame reached the center, the ink shifted. The image moved. Cynthia turned her head and looked at me. I don't sleep anymore. Every night I sit in the living room with a flashlight and a pile of salt at my feet. I've sealed the chimney 3 times. Bricks, concrete, steel mesh. It always breaks open again. The photo always returns. And now I hear her footsteps inside the walls. Cynthia's lullaby plays from the vents, and sometimes, just sometimes, I see her out back beneath the tree, rocking the bundle again, smiling up at my window. Margaret's grave is no longer alone. There are 3 mounds now, each one just a little larger than the last. People say you can't inherit ghosts. They're wrong. You don't just inherit, Then you become them. And as I stare into the mirror now, watching my reflection flicker between my face and Cynthia's smiling one, I understand. The blood always remembers. And Margaret, she's never going to stop crying until I come home. They say old houses have character, that they creak and groan and make noises as they settle. I told myself that when I first moved in. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. Because if I didn't, I'd have to admit something was very wrong. I'd only been in the house for a few weeks. A cheap rental, off the beaten path, surrounded by thick trees and silence so dense it pressed against the windows. It had been abandoned for years, the landlord said. Needed some cleaning up, but it had good bones. It was around midnight the first time I heard it. I had just turned off the bedroom light, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I was on the edge of sleep when the sound came faint at first, almost too quiet to notice. A soft clank, then another, followed by the unmistakable scrape of something heavy dragging across the floorboards. Only, not on the floor, beneath it. I sat up, heart skipping. The room was dark, shadows dancing across the ceiling from the street lamp outside. I held my breath, straining to listen. Clank, drag, clank, drag, chains. That was the only word that made sense. Chains dragging slowly beneath the floor. My bed sat in the center of the room, and the noise seemed to move directly under it, methodical, rhythmic, like someone pacing back and forth just beneath me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe old plumbing. Rats. Maybe the wind somehow pushed something loose under the house. The crawl space ran the full length of the building, and I hadn't checked it since moving in. But none of those things sounded like chains. And none of them would have explained what I heard next. Breathing. A low, rasping breath, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't. It came in wheezing gasps, just under the floorboards, almost directly beneath where I sat. I leapt from the bed and flicked the light on. Silence. I waited. The cheap ceiling fan spinning overhead, creaking in time with my heartbeat. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. The next evening, I walked the perimeter of the house. The crawl space entrance was hidden behind a wall of overgrown weeds, sealed with an old wooden hatch and a rusted padlock. I tugged on it. It didn't budge. I didn't have the key. But the landlord had mentioned it was just a crawl space. Nothing I need to worry about. Yeah, right. The second night, the sounds returned. This time they came earlier. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the first metallic scrape. It reverberated through the floor, soft at first, then louder, closer. It was as if something had awakened, something that now knew I was there. I tiptoed into the living room, holding my breath. The lights were off, but the moonlight poured through the windows, casting silver patterns across the floor. Clank, drag, clank, drag. I stood frozen. The sound passed directly beneath me, pausing for just a moment before continuing toward the back of the house. Then it stopped. The air went still. And then, tap, tap, tap. From beneath the floor. Just 3 slow, deliberate taps, like someone knocking. I backed away, my heart jackhammering in my chest. That night, I slept on the couch. Not that I actually slept. The third night was the worst. It started the same, the sound of dragging chains, the breathing, but then a voice. It was barely more than a whisper, but I heard it dry, broken, like wind through a cracked tombstone. Set me free. I thought I was dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, I was wide awake. Sitting upright on the couch, my body frozen in place. The voice had come from directly beneath me. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I pressed my ear to the hardwood floor, and I heard it, crying. Soft, whimpering sobs like a child. And chains clinking between every breath. I jerked back so fast I nearly dropped the phone. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring down at the floor, terrified of what might be listening back. That's when I made the decision. I had to see what was under there, No more pretending it was rats or pipes or my overactive imagination. Whatever it was, it knew I was here. And I had this sinking feeling it had been waiting. The next morning, I called the landlord. The crawl space? He repeated. Why the hell would you want to go down there? I've been hearing weird noises, he chuckled, but it sounded forced. Old houses make noise, kid. You'll get used to it. Chains, I said. I hear chains. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, you probably shouldn't go down there. What does that mean? He hung up. I drove to the hardware store and bought bolt cutters. Came home, hacked the padlock off the crawl space door, and pried it open. The hatch groaned, the wood splintering as it opened for the first time in what had to be decades. The air that rose up was heavy. Well, like a tomb. I pointed my flashlight. Inside, the light vanished into thick darkness. But as I leaned closer, I heard it again. That rattling whisper, dragging chains, and a voice. Emily, my name. It knew my name. The whisper of my name still hung in the air like smoke. Emily. I recoiled from the crawl space. Opening, almost falling backward into the dirt. My flashlight beam trembled in my hand as I backed away, struggling to catch my breath. I stood there under the cold night sky, the silence around me suffocating, save for the distant hum of cicadas. I should have shut the hatch right then and walked away. I should have boarded it up and moved out the next day. But something had taken root in my mind, deep and stubborn. Curiosity? Maybe. Fear disguised as bravery? Probably. Either way, it had me. The light from my phone barely pierced the blackness under the house. I crouched, testing the ladder that led down into the crawl space. Each wooden rung groaned under my weight, but they held. I took one last look at the world above me, then descended into the dark. The smell hit me instantly, damp earth, mildew, and something fouler underneath, something rotten. The air was colder than it should have been. I could feel it on my skin, like breath. The crawl space was low and narrow, forcing me to hunch as I moved. My light illuminated only a few feet ahead. The wooden beams of the floor above were crusted with cobwebs. Stray insulation hung like rotting flesh from the ceiling. The ground beneath me squelched with every step. Then I saw them. Chains. Thick, rusted, snaking across the dirt floor like veins. I followed them with my light. There were dozens, maybe. More stretched taut in every direction, all vanishing into the shadows. Some of them pulsed. Just slightly, like something was tugging on the other end. I stopped, held my breath. A sudden clang rang out to my left. My heart nearly stopped. I turned the flashlight, the beam shaking uncontrollably. A shape, hunched, unmoving. I stepped closer, the light cutting through the gloom. It was a mannequin. At least, I thought it was. It was human-shaped, sitting against the support pillar, dressed in what looked like tattered, rotting fabric. Its face was porcelain, cracked and yellowed, its eyes nothing more than empty sockets. A chain ran from its neck to a rusted bolt driven into the ground. What the hell? I whispered. Behind me, drag. I whipped around. Nothing. But when I turned back, the mannequin's head had tilted. Just slightly. I stumbled. Backward, tripping over the chain. My flashlight dropped, landing face up in the dirt. In that tilted beam of light, I saw the thing shift. Not just its head this time, its hand. It twitched. And then I heard it again. Emily, help us. Not just one voice now. Dozens. Male and female, old and young, layered on top of each. Other echoing off the dirt walls. A whispering choir. I snatched up the flashlight and bolted through the crawl space, panting, trying not to scream. As I turned a corner beneath the hallway, I stopped dead. There was another figure. This one crouched on all fours, facing away from me, its back covered in long rusted chains. The links had embedded into what little flesh remained. It was breathing slow, deliberate, ragged. Each inhale was a rasp, each exhale a whimper. Please, it hissed. Unchain me. I froze. It began to turn, bones cracking with each movement. I stepped back in instinct. Then it sniffed the air. You're warm. I backed away slowly. Flashlight held out like a weapon. Suddenly, it leapt. I screamed and ducked as its body slammed into the beam where it had just been. Chains yanked it backward like reins on a rabid dog, snapping its limbs back into a twisted, fetal position. It wailed in pain, flailing, the rusted metal carving into its skin. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, not caring where, just away. The whispers turned to screeches, a rising wave of pleading, laughter, and threats all at once. You opened it. Don't leave us. You're one of us now. I reached the hatch, climbed as fast as my legs would take me, slammed the door, shut behind me, and threw every piece of furniture I could find on top of it. Then I collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The house was silent again, but beneath my feet I could feel it. Thump, thump, chains shifting, things waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the crawl space with a knife in one hand and a bag of salt in the other. I'd heard things about salt, how it could ward off spirits. I didn't know if it worked on whatever this was, but it was the only protection I had. At around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. I picked it up, hands trembling. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. On the other end, I heard it again, faint chains dragging, a whisper of breath, then the voice. Emily, don't shut the door. We're not finished. Click. The line went dead. I didn't go back to sleep after the call. I sat frozen in the living room, every light in the house turned on, gripping the bag of salt like a lifeline. The old crawlspace hatch was still barricaded under the couch. 2 dining chairs and a dresser I had dragged in from the hallway. But that didn't make me feel safe. Not really. Something had changed. The air in the house felt wrong, now heavy, damp, charged like the air before a thunderstorm. My breath fogged in front of me, even though the thermostat said it was 72 degrees. The walls creaked and groaned more than usual, like the house was breathing or listening. At around 4:12 a.m., I heard it again, not the chains this time. Something. Scraping. From inside the walls. It started in the bedroom, just a soft, steady drag, like something sharp being pulled across the wood. Then it moved down the hall. The sound followed the perimeter of the room, circling me. I backed into the kitchen, clutching the salt. Then the kitchen lights flickered. Just once, then again, and they went out completely. I stood in darkness, frozen, my ears straining to hear something, anything. For a moment, there was silence, then a knock. Not on the front door, not on the walls, but from beneath the floorboards. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, so close I could feel the vibrations through my feet. And then a voice. He locked the door, but we still found a way. I turned and ran. I didn't know where, I just knew I had to get out of the house. I grabbed my keys and sprinted for the front door, threw it open, and stopped dead. The world outside was gone. Not just quiet. Gone. Where my front lawn should have been, there was fog. Dense, endless fog. So thick my porch light couldn't cut through more than a few feet of it. My car, the mailbox, the neighbor's yard all swallowed in white. I stepped back inside and slammed the door. The chains had followed me. I could hear them again now, louder than ever, rattling directly under the living room floor. It was like they knew I had tried to leave. My phone buzzed. Another message from the same unknown number. The house is part of us now. So are you. My fingers trembled so hard I could barely type. Who are you? What do you want? No response. Just a voicemail notification. I hesitated, then hit play. No words. Just breathing. Ragged. Wet. Close. And beneath it, barely audible chains, dragging, and someone crying. A child. My stomach twisted into knots. That's one of the floorboards. And the hallway buckled. I screamed and jumped back as the wood lifted upward, like something was pushing against it from underneath. Then came the sound of scratching. Long, deep gouges being carved into the floor, like fingernails or claws trying to dig through. I backed into the corner of the kitchen, breathing hard, my eyes locked on the trembling floorboards. I didn't know what to do, so I called someone. Anyone. The line picked up, but there was no greeting. No operator. Just static. Then the same voice from before. Calm, cold, low. There's no one left but us. Emily. I dropped the phone. It took everything I had to keep from collapsing. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hide in the closet and pretend I had imagined it all. But I knew I couldn't. Something was inside my house or under it, and it wasn't going away. I grabbed the salt and began pouring it in lines across every threshold, doors, windows, vents. I traced a line around the crawlspace hatch, the shaking of my hands nearly spilling the entire container. The noise quieted slightly, the chains slowed. The whispering faded to a low, distant murmur, like voices carried from miles away. I sat down in the center of the living room, knees to my chest, rocking back and forth, waiting for the sun to rise. But when the first light broke through the curtains, something strange happened. All the furniture that I had moved, every piece I had shoved onto the hatch was back in its original place. The hatch was wide open. Salt lines were gone. The house was spotless. No scratches, no broken boards, no smell. Like nothing had happened at all. I stared in disbelief, then rushed. To the hatch. I shone my flashlight down into the crawl space. It was empty. No chains, no bones, no fog, nothing. But as I leaned closer, I saw something etched into the inside of the hatch door, carved deep into the wood. A single word, stay. The word carved into the hatch stay sat there like a silent threat. I stared at it for a long time, flashlight trembling in my grip. My heart thudded louder than the chains ever had. It wasn't just the message that terrified me, it was the fact that it hadn't been there the night before. No one else had been in the house. I hadn't let anyone in. I slammed the hatch shut and locked it again, even though part of me knew it wouldn't matter, whatever was happening here. It wasn't something I could lock away, and the house had reset itself. All the salt lines, gone. The scratches, vanished. Even the scorched floorboards from where the lantern fire had started had been restored. The air smelled like nothing too clean, too empty. As I stumbled into the hallway, something else caught my eye. A picture frame, not one I remembered hanging. It was just sitting there centered perfectly on the hallway wall. I moved closer, squinting. It was a black and white photo. Old, faded. A little girl standing in a field. Her head was tilted slightly, and her hands were folded in front of her. But it wasn't her face that disturbed me. It was her eyes. Completely black. And beneath the photo, a label burned into the wood. Emily, age 6. I nearly dropped the flashlight. That was my name. But I had never seen that picture before in my life. And I'd certainly never stood in that field. I tore the frame off the wall and threw it into the trash. The second it landed in the bin, I heard the floorboards creak. I spun around, nothing there. But the air had shifted again. Heavy, watching. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was expectant, like something was waiting. I tried to leave again. Threw some clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my car keys, and headed for the front door. This time, there was no fog outside. The neighborhood looked normal, quiet. A breeze rustled the trees in the yard. The sky was overcast, but not threatening. I stood there on the porch, 1 foot out the door. But something kept me from crossing. The threshold, I can't explain it, not exactly. It was like my body knew something I didn't. A deep, heavy dread anchored me in place. And then I heard it, a slow, rattling breath. Right behind me. I spun, expecting to see someone in the doorway. No one. But my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. But I did. 1 missed call. Unknown number, then new voicemail. My thumb hovered over it, trembling. Then I pressed play. It was my own voice. Don't leave. You'll only bring it with you. Stay. It's safer if it's contained. It remembers. You name now. It knows where to follow. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. I didn't remember recording that. I didn't even recognize the tone I used. It was cold. Flat. Not me. I backed away from the porch, slammed the door shut, and locked every bolt I could find. But the moment I turned back around, I saw it again. The picture frame, back on the wall. But this time, the girl in the photo was smiling, her eyes still pitch black. And behind her in the distance, barely visible through the grain and shadows, was a figure, tall, slumped, bound in chains. The photo hadn't just returned, it had changed. It was watching me. I barricaded the hallway, dragged the bookshelf in front of the wall, hung a sheet over the photo. It was a stupid, useless gesture, I knew that, but I was unraveling. I hadn't slept in over 48 hours. My mind was cracking around the edges. I tried to sit, to breathe, to think. That's when I noticed the knocking again. Only this time, it wasn't from beneath the floorboards. It was coming from inside the walls, right behind me. 3 slow knocks, then silence. Then a whisper, close too close. You never left the house, Emily. We never let you. I stood up, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear over it. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, every closet. I screamed at the walls. I punched the floor. Then, in the silence that followed, I heard the chains again, dragging, closer, louder, coming up from the crawl space. I turned to the hatch in the living room and saw it open again, even though I had locked it. Even though I had watched myself lock it. And on the inside of the door, scratched deeper this time, in thick jagged letters. You can't leave. You are the key. I couldn't stop staring at the words scratched into the inside of the hatch. You are the key. The implications clawed at my mind like jagged nails. This wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't just a presence lurking in the crawl space. It was something deeper. I was part of this. Whether by accident, blood, or design, I was connected to whatever was bound in chains beneath my home. The open hatch seemed to breathe darkness. Not just absence of light, but a pulsing, sentient black that felt like it was watching me, waiting. I wanted to run, but I tried that. The chains followed. The whispers multiplied. And now it seemed like the house itself wouldn't let me leave. I backed away from the opening, grabbing the salt canister again, hands trembling, and poured a thick line across the threshold. But even as the grains fell, I knew the gesture was symbolic at best. Whatever was down there had already passed through once. I picked up the flashlight, praying the batteries hadn't died. The beam flickered, then steadied. I stared into the hatch, into the dark, and then clink, plink, drag, the chains again. But this time, not from deep below. From just out of sight, closer, then a voice, clear, human, familiar. Emily. It rasped, almost lovingly. I froze. That voice, I knew that voice. It was my mother's, but that was impossible. She died 6 years ago. Emily, come down. I've been waiting. I'm cold. I stepped back until I hit the wall behind me. My throat locked shut, breath shaking in my lungs. The voice was identical, the same gentle tone she used when she'd wake me up for school as a child. The same voice that read me bedtime stories. But there was something off beneath it, like 2 voices layered over one another. One soft, one guttural, one not hers. You left me, sweetheart, the voice continued. You locked me away, but I forgive you. Come down, let's be a family again, I screamed. Not out of fear, out of fury, out of grief. No. I shouted, you're not her. The floorboards groaned in response. The house shuddered, like it didn't like what I'd said. Then the voice changed. It dropped the motherly cadence. It became deeper, cold, mocking. You really thought you moved into this house by accident? It hissed. You were brought here. The house called you. The blood knew its own. I didn't respond. Couldn't you open the door? It snarled. You broke the seal. You are the key, Emily. The flashlight in my hand flickered again, this time brighter than before, revealing something just at the lip of the hatch. A hand. No bones this time. It looked fresh, fleshy, human, except for the fingernails, long black, curled like claws. It reached up, slow and deliberate, placing itself against the floorboard. Then another hand joined it. Something was coming out, and I couldn't move. My limbs were frozen with dread, my legs trembling violently. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the ground, spinning in a wild arc and casting a chaotic carousel of shadows across the walls. In one of those flashes, I saw a face, half covered in chains, eyes sealed shut with wire, mouth gaping open but stitched with thick black thread. It wasn't trying to escape. It was being born, rising from the crawl space like it had waited decades to breathe again. My scream caught in my throat. I turned and ran, not to the front door. It never opened. I didn't even try this time. I ran to the bathroom and slammed the door shut, twisting the lock hard. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly broke the key off in the handle. I collapsed to the floor and sobbed. Through the tile, I could hear the chains again, moving freely, now no longer bound to the crawl space. They were in the house. The voice returned, fainter now, but echoing through the walls. Come home, Emily. You were never meant to leave. We've waited so long, and you... A sudden bang against the bathroom door cut it off, then another. And another boom, 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 until the door cracked down the middle. I scrambled back, pressing against the bathtub, eyes wide and terrified. Then silence, and a final whisper, next time. We won't knock. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move from the corner of the bathroom either. Every creak, every gust of wind brushing the siding, every groan of the floorboards made me flinch. The door, splintered from whatever had slammed into it, hung askew on one hinge. But after that last whisper, after next time, we won't knock, there was only silence. And somehow that was worse. The morning sun bled through the blinds like weak tea, casting milky stripes across the tiled floor. My muscles were stiff. My neck ached, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Eventually, when I finally crawled out, I found the house exactly. As I left it, salt scattered across the living room. The hatch still open. The floorboards around it splintered, like something had clawed its way through. But there was no sign of chains. No skeletal hands. No voice. Only silence. I tried to leave again. This time, the front door did open. It almost felt like permission. I didn't pack. I didn't even put on shoes. I just grabbed my phone, keys, and ran. I drove until I hit the edge of the city. Didn't stop until I reached a cheap motel 2 hours away. The curtains didn't close right. The faucet dripped. But I slept dreamless for the first time in days. When I woke up, I checked my phone. The battery was full. 0 missed calls. 1 message, no number. Just 4 words. You never really left. I threw the phone against the wall. It didn't break. Just lit up again on the ground. Come home, Emily. That should have been the end. I told myself I'd never go back. I should have blocked the number, burned the phone, changed everything. But that's not how this works. Because the house wasn't haunted, it was attached to me. And the things under the floorboards, they remembered. The dreams started again the second night. Dreams of chains sliding beneath my skin, of a mouth sewn shut, whispering inside my head, of floorboards cracking open like ribs to reveal black, writhing things beneath. And when I woke every single morning, there were drag marks on the floor of my motel room, chain marks. And the same message written on the mirror in steam, set us free. I tried churches, cleansing rituals, salt circles. Nothing helped. Priests told me to pray. Witches told me to run. But one old man, some half-mad folklore researcher I found 3 towns over, told me the truth. You dug where you shouldn't have, he rasped, one eye cloudy, the other unblinking. You woke up something old, something buried alive. That house wasn't a place, it was a prison. And he tapped my forehead. You were the last lock. I asked him how to fix it. He just shook his head. You don't fix it. You finish it. So now I'm here, sitting in the car, in the driveway of the house I swore I'd never return to. The sun's going down. The windows are dark, but I can feel it waiting. The hatch is still open. Somehow. Salt's all gone. And the chains have started to sing. Yes, sing. A low, metallic humming that echoes like a lullaby through the bones of the building. It's beautiful. And the way a siren song is beautiful. And in my pocket, a new key. Not the kind that opens doors. The kind that ends things. An old iron spike, soaked in blessed oil. The man gave it to me before he died. Told me to drive it into the heart of the crawl space, but there's a catch. I have to go in alone. And I have to stay until the house is silent. Truly silent, even if it means I don't come back out. So this is my message, my record, in case someone finds this phone. If you're reading this and you've heard chains under your floorboards, do not answer. Do not dig. Do not listen to the voice calling your name. It is not your mother. It is not your friend. It is not lonely. It is hungry. And when it says you're the key, it doesn't mean you can set it free. It means it's already unlocked you. It means it's already inside.